Harborview Hospital is the largest medical facility in the city. With the sudden onset of harsh winter, the leaves of the trees within its premises had long perished, their withered branches shivering and moaning in the howling northern winds. Various posters and slogans, remnants of fervent times, plastered the hospital's dilapidated gray walls. Even on the morgue's walls, which stood aloof from the rest of the hospital, a bold declaration read, "If the capitalist roaders refuse to capitulate, they shall be utterly annihilated." The morgue itself spanned over 300 square meters, separated into inner and outer chambers. It served as a temporary resting place for souls departed within the hospital's care. Local customs dictated that the deceased be cremated at the funeral home only after 3 days. This night, a former city government official labeled as a capitalist roader, succumbed to a sudden death after enduring prolonged torments both mental and physical. A pair of revolutionaries, tasked with overseeing the corpse, cursed their disturbed slumber while lazily carrying the dead away, following Elder Mason towards the morgue. The midnight chill was as harsh as a whip, occasionally sprinkled with stray snowflakes. Power lines and tree tops whined under the shroud of night, adding a layer of trepidation to the cold dark. Elder Mason staggered forward, flashlight in hand, muttering under his breath, "Another one gone. Those who shouldn't have died, have died. Can it, old coot? What the hell are you mumbling about? Move it, my bones are thoroughly chilled." Chubby Lee cursed from behind. When they reached the ominous dark doors of the morgue, the revolutionaries set down their grim burden. Skinny, gasping for breath, complained, "Finally here, I'm dead beat." As Elder Mason fumbled with a bunch of keys, his aging hands trembling from more than just the cold, attempting to unlock the door without success. "Damn it, nothing goes right when you're old." Chubby Lee cursed, snatching the keys and swiftly unlocking the door. At that instant, as the door creaked open, a hoarse and somber song erupted from the chilling interior of the morgue. The essence of Marxism is simplified to one line: rebellion is justified. It was as if the voice rose from the bowels of the earth, sinister and frigid. Chubby Lee's soul nearly left his body. His eyes wide with terror, he froze for a few seconds before dropping the keys and fleeing in a panic, yelling, "It's bad. The dead. The dead have risen." He dashed madly, legs pumping wildly as he fled. Skinny's legs gave out from pure fright. He turned to run but tripped over the capitalist roader on the ground. A cry of despair escaped him as a warm torrent traveled down both legs. Scrambling with all his might, he fled, never to walk alone at night again due to his newfound phobia. Elder Mason, after all, was a man of the world. Awoken from his drunken stupor, he wasn't paralyzed by fear, but he was indeed terrified. He had only heard of the eerie and fear-inducing tales of corpse reanimation, but had never encountered it firsthand. Frantically, he pushed the door shut, panting and shouting as he ran, "I know you died unjustly, but please don't scare me, old Mason. I've never wronged anyone in my life." While struggling to catch his breath, he kept glancing back in fear. The rumors of the morgue being haunted spread swiftly, growing more terrifying and mysterious as they were embellished, sending shockwaves throughout the city. Eventually, it got to the point where people were too afraid to conduct funeral services there. The head of the Military Control Committee, Director Lee, did not believe in the haunting. He promptly summoned the two revolutionaries to report on the incident, berating them furiously for spreading tales of ghosts from feudalism, capitalism, and revisionism, even threatening to re-educate them by sending them to a study class. Subsequently, Director Lee dispatched a few people to Harborview Hospital to solve the mystery. After lunch, a group of them arrived at the city hospital's morgue in a green liberation truck. A miracle had occurred. The corpse that was left at the door the previous night had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a stretcher covered with a thin layer of snow. This is really haunting. Could it be that the dead can walk? Elder Mason felt a chill wind blowing down his back as he mumbled in astonishment. "Ghosts, spirits, nonsense," bellowed Big Cannon John, from the Military Control Committee, his voice echoing loudly. Understand this, it's a new tactic in the class struggle. Comrades, do not be misled by the superficial phenomena of the reactionaries. We must heighten our revolutionary vigilance to prevent our enemies from sabotaging the great achievements of our proletarian cultural revolution. Old Mason, open the door for me. Even though it was daytime, Old Mason was still terrified. He tiptoed to the great iron door and with a creak, yanked it open, hastily retreating backward. You old fool, you've lived such a long life and yet you're scared of your own shadow. Big Cannon Jean grumbled irritably and shoved Old Mason aside with a swing of his hand. He then ordered the group behind him, you three, go in and take a look. The three young soldiers clad in yellow military attire exchanged wary glances before mustering the courage to enter the outer chamber of the morgue. Inside were iron coffins prepared for transporting bodies to the funeral home and several miscellaneous items like bamboo brooms and shovels, nothing out of the ordinary. One of them, with a long face, cautiously slid open the door to the inner chamber. As soon as there was a crack, his eyes fixed in shock for a few seconds before he let out a horrified scream and darted out, disappearing in an instant. The shorter one hadn't seen what happened but was petrified by his comrades' cries and also fled in a panic. What the devil? Is everyone bewitched? Screeching like they've lost their minds. Big Cannon Jean cursed loudly, demanding from the remaining two, what exactly did you see? The shorter man kept his head down, too disturbed to utter a word. Worthless, all of you are utterly worthless. Big Cannon Jean cursed, his heavy steps booming as he entered the morgue. The moment he pushed open the inner door, Big Cannon Zhang's eyes and mouth widened in sheer terror, a scene that nearly sent his soul flying. Along the wall of the chamber stood over a dozen corpses, their faces deathly pale. Some bared their teeth and glared, others grimaced in a mix of laughter and tears, while some had fiendishly twisted expressions. As the spring-loaded doors slowly swung back into place with a clatter, they roused Big Cannon Jean from his stupor. Although he was known for rashness and fearlessness, he had never experienced such a terrifying and horrifying sight before. With his heart pounding and his face drained of color, he stumbled out in a disheveled retreat, feigning composure while muttering to himself, "Oh my, mother! There are truly ghosts." No sooner had the words left his mouth than a hair-raising, soul-shattering laughter erupted from a corner of the morgue. The kind of sinister cackling that would strike unprecedented panic and fear in anyone. A chilling fear that made one's spine tingle and body shudder. Then, a ghostly singing voice wafted through, singing, the essence of Marxism, after all the intricate arguments, boils down to one sentence, it's right to rebel. It's right to rebel. Shaken to the core, Big Cannon Jean bolted, running faster than anyone. All thoughts of dignity were abandoned, even his hat fell off into the snow, ignored as he fled in panic. The others scattered like a startled nest, abandoning their still-running vehicle. Old Mason, who had wisely kept his distance, couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of Big Cannon Jean and his men's comical escape, though he quickly made his own hasty retreat from the scene of commotion. Upon their disheveled return to the Military Control Committee, Director Lee slammed his desk in fury, berating them as complete failures, utterly useless. In a fit of rage, he took matters into his own hands, arming himself with a Model 54 pistol and leading a daunting convoy in a military SUV towards Harborview Hospital. With daylight waning rapidly in the winter afternoon, the team arrived and braked sharply in front of the morgue. Director Lee, flashlight in hand, stepped out from the vehicle, while Big Cannon Jean, now wary, kept his distance. "Open the door," commanded Director Lee. Two men strained the massive iron doors open, flooding the room with the beams of several flashlights. "Charge in, everyone inside," Director Lee ordered again. Hesitating only briefly at the entrance, the team surged into the morgue's outer chamber, some still peering cautiously into the depths of the inner chamber. "What are you afraid of? We're soldiers armed with Mao Zedong's thought, fearless," Director Lee bellowed, chastising their timidity. "And you, Big Cannon Jean, stop being such a coward. Your legs were fast enough running from ghosts. With no choice, Big Cannon Zhang trudged closer. Comrades, a counter-revolutionary incident has occurred in this morgue, disrupting our revolutionary work. We, armed with Mao Zedong's thought, must defend our proletarian rule with our lives. Director Li rallied the group with a fiery speech. Open the door, he commanded once more. As the inner chamber door swung open, a cold draft hit them, making everyone tremble. Inside, under the flashlight beams, lay a dozen corpses neatly on the morgue slabs in complete silence. What nonsense has bewitched you all? Director Li was incensed. They're all lying there calmly. What queue of dead are you talking about? All lies. Then glaring at Big Cannon Zhang, open your eyes. What's there to fear? Confused, Big Cannon Zhang mumbled, but I saw them, lining up, singing. There must be something supernatural. Nonsense. What ghosts and spirits? Director Li cursed, threatening Big Cannon Zhang with removal from the committee to a sock factory for re-education. Resigned, Big Cannon Zhang knew better than to argue with his supreme authority. Now let's inspect thoroughly. What's there to be scared of? Director Li led the way inside. After a scolding session that left everyone on edge, they inspected the room without finding anything amiss and quickly retreated. That night, a frantic phone call woke Director Li. Reports of more ghostly disturbances at the morgue made its way to the committee, reviving his frustrations and fears. Damn it, what's going on with that morgue? He muttered while dressing, despite his wife's pleas not to go. Ignoring her, Director Li set out again, surrounding the morgue. As they entered, they were startled by two grinning corpses wearing rebel armbands, having the group with fear. Even Director Li, no stranger to fear from his rural upbringing, felt a chilling panic. Yet, his position demanded he mask his fear, maintaining a veneer of authority and bravado. Leading a charge, they found the room arranged with over a dozen corpses dressed in black, posing as if alive, instilling pure terror in everyone. Director Li's command to stand strong was rendered useless as the sight of animated corpses sent everyone scrambling in fear. The following day, desperate for resolution, Director Li sought the expertise of former Chief Detective Su, now a prisoner accused of conservative and counter-revolutionary crimes. Director Li, recalling Su's legendary detective work, proposed leveraging his skills to solve the haunting mystery, a decision influenced by recent severe scolding from higher-ups demanding a swift resolution. Upon reaching the prison, Director Li, leaving his usual grim demeanor aside, politely approached the esteemed but imprisoned Chief Su, proposing his enlistment to address the morgue's disturbances. Chief Su, amusement and disdain in his response, agreed to assist, mocking the fear-induced chaos among the ranks of the committee. Accepting the task with a hint of sarcasm about the high regard in which he was suddenly held, Chief Su's reaction was a mix of intrigue and mockery toward the supposed case that had unsettled the Military Control Committee to its core. Thus, a plan was set in motion, with Chief Su at the helm, to unravel the mystery behind the morgue's alleged supernatural occurrences, marking a pivotal moment in a narrative driven by fear, superstition, and political fervor. Okay, promises are not to be lightly given. How many people are needed? Just me. Old Su stretched out lazily, yawned. I need to take a second sleep. One person is not enough, I can't answer for any problems. Director Li shook his head like a rattle. Let's send a driver and 2 assistants. The operation will start at 10 o'clock tonight. Now he seemed more relieved, and went to report to the City Revolutionary Committee. In the evening, Director Li arrived at the prison office early and seized the time to take a nap. When he saw that it was 10 o'clock on his red flag watch, he immediately ordered Su to be taken to the jeep. He didn't want to go to that place where his legs went weak and hair raised, but he was afraid of other problems, and even afraid that Su would use the opportunity to escape. So, he had to follow the scene with his gun. When the car had been driving for about 5 minutes, Sue suddenly asked to turn around and go back, saying that he had forgotten his dry tobacco. Director Lee hurriedly handed over his cigarettes. But old Sue said he didn't like that stuff and insisted on going back to get his dry tobacco leaves. Director Lee looked displeased, but it was not a good time to flare up, so he let the car go back to get the tobacco leaves. Half an hour later, the car finally arrived at the morgue. Director Lee turned around and called to old Sue, seeing him leaning back and sleeping deeply. At that point, he was very angry but swallowed his saliva and kept his voice down, gently tugging at Sue's clothes. "Hey, Sue, wake up, we're here." Old Sue rubbed his sleepy eyes, stretched out lazily and said, "You kid, you disturbed my good dream." He pushed the car door and got off. The dark night covered everything like a pot lid. The piercing north wind blew through the broken windows of the outer house of the morgue, making a patter, patter sound, adding to the mystery and terror of the night. At this time, Director Lee's legs were a little weak. He held up his gun to give himself courage and followed old Sue from afar. Sue strode to the front of the main door, pulled it open with a bang and strode in without hesitation. Perhaps influenced by Sue's fearless spirit, the two assistants and Director Lee cautiously approached the morgue entrance. They saw Sue shine a flashlight around, kicked open the door of the morgue, and as the door opened, a corpse pounced into Sue's arms. This really scared Sue. The 3 men behind him screamed and ran out. Sue took a close look, gently patted the face of the corpse, smiled and said, "No need for formalities. You're even giving me a Western-style hug, you should go rest." After that, he put the corpse aside. Under the light of Sue's flashlight, more than a dozen bodies were still neatly arranged along the walls on both sides. Between hugging and welcoming, "You're too polite, I'm really sorry." Sue chuckled and said humorously. He shone his flashlight around, then sat on the autopsy table, placed the flashlight between his legs, took out a tin box, rolled up the dry tobacco, and mumbled playfully, "Which one of you is pretending to be dead? Come out, I'll treat you to a genuine Guangdong cigarette." The large room was silent, only the howling wind outside. Suddenly, the flashlight on Sue's knees went out. The room was instantly pitch black, and only Sue's red cigarette end was glowing. The 3 men outside unconsciously retreated further back. "Pass me another flashlight," Sue shouted towards the entrance. Director Lee sternly ordered his subordinates to go. But the 2 of them dithered and didn't dare to go into the room. One of them shouted, "Old Sue, we'll shine the light for you at the door. I'll say it again, if you're pretending to be dead, step out." Sue raised his voice and thumped his flashlight on the autopsy table. "You've scared Director Lee from the Military Control Committee quite a bit. Be careful in case he labels you a counter-revolutionary, he absolutely has that power." Director Lee heard the mockery in Sue's words, but at this time he had no mind to consider these. He just pretended not to hear. Everything was still quiet. Suddenly, a rat squeaked and ran quickly from under the corpse's feet. The 3 men at the door were startled and instinctively walked a few steps back, their hearts pounding. "Well, you can really pretend, then I'll have to invite you out." Sue gave a soft smile, crushed the cigarette butt under his foot, and confidently walked to the side of the corpse, patting each one on the shoulder. When he patted the 7th corpse, he suddenly grabbed its shoulders and yanked it out. The corpse suddenly opened its eyes and fired a punch at his face. Although Sue was over 60, his skills were not diminished. He saw him swiftly dodge to the side, his left hand swiftly parried the punch, his right palm quickly raised and locked on the man's throat, forcing him unable to resist. At this point, Sue quickly reversed his left wrist to take control of the man. All of these actions took just a few seconds. This left the 3 men outside dumbstruck. When Sue brought the man to the door, Director Lee suddenly snapped out of it and couldn't help but blurt out, "What a police captain." He hurriedly shouted at his 2 subordinates, "Quick, tie him up and take him to the Military Control Committee for a good lesson." Sue hurriedly said, "This man is not quite right in the head, don't hurt him." Then he got in the car and left. Back at the Military Control Committee, Director Lee interrogated overnight. That ghost lived in a neighboring county, and because his family was of capitalist origin, he was dismissed from public office, often criticized, and not long after he developed mental illness. His wife and children left him, causing his condition to become even more serious, and he was finally sent to a mental hospital. A few days ago, when the mental hospital held a criticism meeting, he took the opportunity to escape when no one was watching, and wandered to Bygone City. During one funeral, he slipped into the morgue, and then staged a series of farces. Director Lee quickly wrote a report, boasting about how he educated and reformed Royalist Captain Sue into assisting the Revolutionary Committee in cracking the haunted morgue. In a few days, Director Lee was promoted. He was appointed as the 6th vice chairman of the City Revolutionary Committee. One day, that young companion of Director Lee came to the prison. He was there to retrieve the report that asked Sue to sign to confirm Director Lee's achievement. Old Sue signed Director Lee's report. Old Sue, who was lying on the bed smoking, gestured with his mouth towards the toilet. "It's there." He chuckled, "I put it where it should be." The young man was half doubtful. He lifted the toilet lid, pinched his nose with 2 fingers, and carefully picked up the feces-covered report. "You are absolutely reactionary. I tell you, Captain Sue, don't think that just because you solved a case, you're great. You are still a target of dictatorship, and you must earnestly confess your problems." He shouted sharply, threw down his words and left angrily. Seeing the young man's funny appearance, Sue couldn't help but laugh out loud. He was so happy, so relaxed, that he even laughed till tears came out. Translate this article into English, keeping the basic meaning the same, only rewriting.